Hello and welcome to my Art Update podcast thingy. This is update number 48. God, don't know what the title is yet. I literally just got home from the university and I'm recording this because I don't want it to be any later than it already is. I'm a week behind on these podcasts thanks to the show this past weekend. So what I'm going to do, or what I'm going to try my best to do, is to give you today a quick sort of off the cuff, off the top of my head update of the last couple of weeks, of the last week since the last update was released. And then what I'll do is I'll try to release another update this week where I talk about sort of something else, because there won't be too many art updates this week, because mostly I'm just scrambling to get ready to fly to Canada next Wednesday. So yeah, that's sort of where we are. So let me talk about consent. And I don't mean the concept, although that too, maybe that's what I'll talk about later in the week. But the show, the Theater Lab that I just produced this past weekend. So this thing started off, and you may remember this if you've been listening to updates, as me and Marie Hahn, my German national collaborator, who was out of Japan when we started talking about this project. She wasn't able to participate in the summer show because of reasons, but we were talking about let's do something like late November, early December, minimal rehearsals, and it's a theme, and we do a short piece, and it's followed by a discussion. And the reason I wanted to do this is because I knew going to Canada in December meant that I'm probably not going to be producing any theater till next summer. I wanted something else on the slate for, artistic reasons. I wanted to put something out. Also for financial reasons. I mean, the show didn't break even, I guess, or barely broke even, but it's just to have, I needed cash flow. It's all owed money, but I can juggle it if there's more to juggle. So there's that. Sorry, not super exciting reason. But then we decided, because my friend Jodi Ito is the first certified for theater intimacy director in Japan. She was certified in New York this past summer, that we could do something around the subject of consent. So that's what we did. And that's what I've been talking to you about for the last few weeks. And this thing that was supposed to be a 5 to 10 minute piece, probably featuring me and Marie. And I was going to invite Abby from the summer show, although she wasn't available, and maybe Merritt. So I thought maybe there's going to be 3 or 4 of us, sort of blossomed into this thing where there were 6 ensemble members who ended up on stage, 1 ensemble member who didn't end up on stage because she had to write the Japanese language exam that weekend. So she came in and helped us, and she filled in for people while they weren't there. And Mayuka Kowaguchi, who came to direct the Buto scenes, so she came in 2 or 3 times. And the significance of her is that she was in my first show that I ever did in Japan. So when she was still a high school student, she was still in her last year of high school. She was grade 12 and 17, and she did my first show in Japan, which was my sort of Shakespeare mashup that I had done as a reading in Canada previous to that. So she's gotten in. She went on to do modern dance and then got really into Buto. So now she is our go-to Buto person, even though she's now out of the country for a while. We caught her sort of just in time. She was actually supposed to leave this past summer, but somehow things got messed up and she didn't go. So that was, maybe not. I don't know how fantastic that was for her, but it was fantastic for us because we got to use it for the show. So anyway, this project became something where there were 8 people involved, 6 of whom ended up on stage. We got a new technical lighting, not designer, but board operator and cue operator, possible sort of stage management, backstage person joining us just at the last minute on this show. So there were nine of us. And then my friend Johan has gotten into doing procedurally generated sort of music and soundscapes. And I think I mentioned the other week that I went and I photographed and video recorded his improvised music and dance performance that he did with a dancer. And at that point, I asked him if he'd come and do a live score of this show. And so he did. So there were actually 10 of us involved. It's supposed to be a 2 to 4 person thing. And I thought 3 or 4 rehearsals. Looking at the Trello board that we used to keep track of rehearsals, I believe we hit 15 by the time we hit the tech rehearsal. Now, the schedules were insane. And I think all 6 of the final performers were never in the same room together for more than a couple hours until the Friday before the show. But actually, it's interesting. The summer show was a lot bigger, a lot more technically ambitious, although this show was really technically ambitious for what it was. But I was really happy with what we put on, and I'll talk about the discussion maybe later in the week. So let me use this episode to talk about the show. It ended up being about 12 scenelets, which we connected through transitions, mostly of people picking up little pieces of paper that had things on them that they opened up, and they said whether they consented or not to those things. They were color-coded, so for different parts of the show, we were reading different types of consent. So we started with sexual consent, went on to sort of personal life consent, and then was it medical consent, and then economic consent. And then the final category, we just all read the same thing, which was whether we did or did not consent to being born, which, in some ways is the biggest decision that you don't get to make, right? So anyway, if you'd like to see it, I'm going to be leaving the website up, and you can buy the online tickets, which will point to the evening performance of the show, which was the best one. That'll probably be up for another week before I archive it and create sort of some kind of video sales thing. But if you want to see it, just go to ytg.jp. And actually, there's probably a pop-up that'll take you to it, but you could go to ytg.jp/consent. And that should enable you to buy tickets to the live stream. If you can't, just send me a message. And if you want a free ticket, just send me a message, because I'd rather people watch it than not. So the recording includes the show and the discussion we had afterwards. So going back to the show. So it was rough. I was actually more technically ambitious with this than I planned to be as well. I mounted 2 projectors to the ceiling. So one of them, these are sort of the short throw projectors I've accumulated over the last couple years of the pandemic. So one of them was projecting on the back wall. Unfortunately, that one's a little bit dim. I really need to raise money to replace that one with something brighter. So that one projected some images on the back wall, which we had through a couple of the scenes. And then the other one projected images on the floor, which we used for the Twister game at the end, but also for the scene where I needed like 3 squares projected on the floor. I didn't want to just use top lights. I wanted really delineated squares. And in the end, it didn't work. The problem is I didn't have a lot of time to decide how to place them and to experiment, so I kind of just had to guess where the best placement would be. And to be honest, it probably would have worked better if I'd moved the projector further downstage. But I had issues with the kind of stands we had. I had issues tilting the projector far enough to hit the floor, and even the other one just to hit the back wall, because they're short throw projectors. The angle is quite steep, and you really need to. Even when they're sitting on the floor, you need to like lift the back pretty far. If you're significantly far away from the surface you're projecting on. So I actually, once they were mounted on their sort of ceiling mount things, I actually had to get a bunch of like wire and sort of pull them tight so I could get them. And I didn't have a lot of time to do this. I was doing this late Friday night, and I wanted to catch the last train home. I didn't want to stay overnight because I had to perform in the show, and I didn't want to be completely dead. I wanted to at least get a couple hours of sleep, which I managed, 2.5. So I was doing that late Friday night, and I didn't have it still took me like 45 minutes for one and about 30 minutes for the other, but I couldn't afford to spend more time getting the angle completely right. For the one projecting on the floor, I needed to crank it high enough that it wasn't shining in the audience's face. I had to pull it's not high enough. I had to pull the angle down so that it was hitting the floor. So it wasn't, I couldn't get it perfectly straight either, which meant that the stage left square for that scene with the squares was not as bright as the stage right and center ones. And it didn't quite have the effect that I wanted. It was close, but not quite. Sorry for that pause. I thought I heard an earthquake. I think it was just the wind though. So that's what happened with that. I got really ambitious with the technical stuff. There were only 19 lighting cues, so that wasn't too ambitious. And I had someone came in who actually doesn't know how to work our lighting board, and I kind of taught him how to work it on the fly. And he helped me program so that I could move around the space. And strangely, I actually know the number. I knew the channels for the lights, which is amazing because we just put that house plot in the fall, and I haven't really used it since then, except on one show. It's partly because Xander, who helped me set up that plot, put everything in a very logical order, so I'm able to sort of memorize what lights go where. It's not quite as random as it used to be. Anyway, so Jonah came in, and even though he was slower probably at programming than I was, it enabled me to look at the lights and not look at the board. So I think it went faster, and I was able to make decisions quicker. So yeah, and getting back to the show itself, I think I'm quite happy with it. I'd really love for you guys to watch it and tell me what you think. I was happy with the improvised sound. Johan, he's the kind of guy who doesn't like constraints. He would love it. It was just like fully improvised. But obviously, as a theater piece, we needed certain moods for certain scenes, and some scenes he needed to actually like fade out so we could put sound cues in because we had specific sound cues that we needed that were run off another computer. But I thought he did an amazing job, and he at the last minute we did I think it was in the evening, the Friday evening. I asked him if he could make a cough machine because we wanted this coughing theme to continue through the show to represent basically the destruction, the people giving up and destroying their bodies. Like quote unquote consenting to that, but not actually having real consent. The idea was this sort of extended metaphor of a miner and how we think about maybe sex workers. I think I've talked about this before on these update podcasts, but we think about like sex workers, well, they can't really consent because there's hardship or whatever. Even if they say they consent, they haven't really, they can't really consent because we don't live in a society that enables them to consent. But that holds true for everyone. And I gave this example of miners, and it became a sort of thing, and it became a character in the show. And the idea was that the coughing was supposed to represent the silicosis that, like miners, any kind of miner, because if you're exposed to rock dust at all, you're exposed to this dust essentially cuts your lungs to pieces. And historically, companies have been really bad at providing protective equipment for their workers. And people have, you've heard of black lung. That's what black lung is. But it can happen to miners and any type of miner, anyone who's working sort of underground where there's rock dust in the air. Anyway, so it was sort of representative of that. So I had him create this cough machine because we were trying to cough throughout the show. And first of all, there's so much going on. And the rehearsal period, the rehearsal, once we had the show together, we didn't have a lot of time to sort of really run it over and over again. And we kept A, forgetting to cough, and B, it was kind of hard on us to constantly cough throughout the show. But Johan created this great sort of soundscape of coughs that really actually did a much better job, I think, than we could have. And then the scene at the end where we all had to cough really hard, it meant that we could cough a little bit, but because he brought in all these realistic sounding coughs that overlapped each other and stuff, it actually created the effect without us having to bust our voices up, which was good because the next scene, we had to sing a song badly, as it turned out. We decided by the final show, we weren't even going to try to. We were singing "Baby It's Cold Outside" because of the argument that happens every year about that song and how it relates to consent. So we sang that at the end, but at the end of the day, we didn't have time to do it well. So we just explicitly did it badly. We tried in the morning dress rehearsal and in the afternoon show to kind of do it, but basically for the evening performance, we went off the hook, and we were terrible. We were terrible, and we were terrible on purpose. Anyway, so yeah, that's kind of a basic rundown of the show. I could go through it scene by scene. I don't know. I mean, tell me if you're interested in me doing that. I'm perfectly happy to. If there's not a lot of people listening to this, then maybe this isn't the forum for that. But that's sort of the main thing I wanted to say about the show. This was like supposed to be a really small thing. It ended up being very ambitious. I didn't sleep very well. I'm still recovering from it. Probably not a great decision a week and a half before I fly to Canada. I've got so much stuff I've got to do this week. And I'm just trying to figure out how I'm going to get it all done. So much stuff I have to do that I can't do once I'm out of the country. So yeah, that's what's going on. So yeah, I don't regret it though. I'm glad we did that show. I don't know what it'll become. I mean, like I said, I keep calling it a show. It's a lab. It was a lab. There was no requirement that was a setup for something we do in the future, although, maybe it'll inspire the next group to do something around the subject of consent, or maybe not. Maybe it's a one-off thing, just a chance for us to discuss the topic. And that's fine. That's all I wanted. So yeah. So that's what I had to say about consent. Other updates. I got paid for the photography job, but because all this invoicing crap, basically I ended up invoicing through my friend Kim's company, which means that she just paid me right away, and she's going to chase them down for the money, which is great. And also added a fee in to the invoice for her trouble. So yeah, that worked out. And so I'll try to record another episode, another update this week, where I'll talk about the discussion we had after the show. So until then, that's me, Andrew out.